Everything you think you know about sexual assault is probably wrong. Not because you don't care or you're not interested or you haven't been listening. It's just that our society is absolutely littered in incorrect myths. Myths that people stand by because they're not educated in this topic and don't understand what the truth really is. So, I'm going to share today three of the most common myths that I have come across as a survivor and as a silent survivor over the last 30 years since I was raped to show the level of complete falseness of what these myths actually are. The first one that I've heard is that it is common for false rape to be reported and it's too easy to send a man to prison. Now, before I go into this one, I just want to make a quick disclaimer again, and I've said it before and I'll keep saying it. I say man and woman. What I'm really saying is survivor and persecutor, because I know that men can be violated as well, and I know that women can do the bad shit to begin with. However, to believe that it is common to falsely report rape and it's too easy to send somebody down is the most uneducated, most emotionally unintelligent thing I think I could hear. And since me telling my story, it has been very interesting to see a range of different reactions from men. Most of them are generally very, very good people. And I don't judge all men, obviously, just because I got violated by a man. But the majority of them say, good on you, well done for persevering. We need animals like that off the street. But then, interestingly, I've had about three or four people say things like, it's too easy to send a man to prison. And they immediately jump to the defense of the rapist. Now, let me just give you some context to put that together. If you're a rapist, you have an 85% chance of your name not even ending up with the police. So only 15% of rapes even get reported to the police. If you then go to the police, most of those cases are dismissed because they don't have the evidence, because there's a whole array of different experiences that these women have had. But basically, of the 15% that go to the police, the majority can't go through with any investigation because there's not enough evidence. Of the few that actually get enough buy-in from the police to have an investigation, that file then has to go through another massive milestone and it gets sent to the CPS, and they reject around about 50% of people. So even if you've had an investigation, which can take literally years, where they're finding evidence, piecing it together, it is a big piece of work. And I can assure you, my officer spent thousands of hours on my case without any shadow of a doubt. So then you get it sent over to the CPS. Now remember that the CPS don't want to have people in court that don't stand a chance of winning. So for the people that the CPS take on, they only take on the ones that they look at the detail. All right, we've got a really good chance of prosecution in this one, because they don't want to have bad stats against them as well. They have to be seen to be doing their job. So they are very selective over the people that actually are taken on. But people only measure what goes on with rape by what actually happens in court, failing to recognize the endless amount of interviews you've had to sit through, the endless amount of milestones that you have to go through, the massive imbalance of justice, of the things that he's allowed to have that the survivor isn't allowed to have. Most people in the justice system can't survive it because the heat gets too much. So the 3% that even make it into court, about 60% of those get a positive verdict. And that's the bit that people measure it on. They just look at what happens in court, failing to recognize this huge train. Oop, hit my microphone. This huge train of things that happened in order to get there in the first instance. The CPS will not take you on unless you've got a really good case. And I feel for the women that have been violated and they don't have the evidence like I had to actually get there. So to suggest that it's too easy to send somebody to prison, I'm sorry, if you speak in that way, you sound like you haven't been to school and you sound very, very lacking in emotional intelligence. And I'm sorry to be so blunt on it, but it is so blatantly obvious that what I'm saying is factual. And anybody that is seeing this tiny little margin of the statistical people that have been violated and suggest it's too easy, then you are literally clueless. And I haven't got the specific stats in front of me, but I can round them up by memory. I checked with about 3 or 4 different AI apps, and it said that in 2025 there was over 76,000 reported cases of rape. 76,000 in 1 year, and that's in the UK alone. Now, only 2 and a bit thousand made it into court. So about 74,000 cases of rape that were reported didn't even make it into court. I don't know how many of those got an investigation, but they were rejected by the CPS and any other thing that might happen in that process. So to look at the ones with the rare evidence, the ones that had the lucky opportunity to go to court, to then measure an entire community of people that have been raped on that tiny bunch of very, very fortunate people that were lucky enough to get into court, then do not measure the tens of thousands of people that went through that experience. And that is what you should be looking at collectively, not just the very small few that have only been accepted into the court because they had irrefutable evidence that actually it was just going to be whoever won on the day. Myth number 2, assaults are committed by strangers. Let me make something clear. About 90% of rapes are done by somebody known to the victim or known to the survivor. 10% are done by complete strangers. They're the stats that are given. Now, in all the dozens and dozens and dozens of survivors that I have met, some I stay in touch with, some I haven't stayed in touch with because I've just met at, say, a social gathering. But of all those people that I have met, I've literally met one, and I mean one, that was violated by a stranger. And ironically, actually, it's not ironic, it's unsurprisingly, she was the only person that went straight to the police. She was held by gunpoint and she was violated by a stranger. Everybody else is violated by generally their partner. That is the most common one, but it's also very well known for people to have, in some instances, it includes family. It's very commonly people are in positions of authority. That can be teachers, it can be coaches, it can be bosses. It can also be community members, it can be friends, it can be friends of the family. There are so many different dynamics, but the whole essence between the understanding of being raped by a stranger versus being raped by somebody known to you is so different psychologically. And where we have a problem in society, and even particularly for a jury as well, is that these narratives around how a victim or a survivor should respond, they go straight to the police, they have all this DNA evidence. It isn't that simple when they're known to the person, because they're effectively throwing a hand grenade into a community of people and just praying that the other people that know this other person that raped them and that is liked and respected and supported by these other people are then going to believe that this person was violated by them. But in terms of understanding that rapes are not committed mostly by strangers, it then makes a different narrative about how people should respond, understanding how people have delayed reactions. They don't tell people, they shut down, they have psychological issues, there's delayed reporting, there's so many other things that impact on this, because a response from being raped by a stranger is very different from a response being raped by somebody you know. Then it's going to make it very hard for the jury to understand it. This narrative is pushed by the media because, one, it's more dramatic. People like to read a drama story. And two, we don't like to believe that we actually live in sometimes a very unsafe community of people. We don't like to think that the people that we trust could actually be dangerous. But the reality is that's the world we live in. And when the media drive this narrative, first of all, they create almost cognitive dissonance sometimes, because other people then have a belief of what constitutes as rape and how people should respond to rape. And if that behavior doesn't match what they've been led to believe through the media, then they find themselves not understanding why people do or say or behave in the way that they do. We like to believe that it's only dangerous when they're complete strangers, and we're all trained to not walk down alleys late at night and don't speak to strangers. And we're trained this stuff from a very, very young age. But we're not trained to be aware of the red flags that actually you're dealing with somebody that's psychopathic behind closed doors, that have become very publicly high functioning and very publicly adaptable, so people don't have any suspicions whatsoever. They're the true dangers, and we need to step away from believing that the danger is actually with strangers. The danger is with the communities of people that we don't know them inside and out. Myth number 3. If you're violated and you can't remember all of it, it can't have been that bad. Oh my God. So first of all, I can be quite forgiving on this one. Not everybody has studied psychology. Not everybody's had a career in psychology. But we have to start understanding that when you go through something like a violation, and this isn't just to do with sexual violence, this can be anything where it is a high level of trauma. So this can be people that have life-threatening conditions. It can be people that lose children, people that, or they see accidents and things like that, like very, very life-changing experiences. When we go through something like that, your body will reach a level of fear that you generally don't reach in many circumstances. And when your body reaches that level of fear, your brain will do everything it can to protect you. And people don't understand that when your body reaches that level of fear, I don't just mean you're a bit scared because you're going up on stage doing a public speaking gig. I mean, you're reaching a level of fear that your body will react in a different way that is involuntary. And that involuntary reaction is your brain going, it cannot cope with what is happening to this body at the moment. So it has a number of different reactions. It has blackouts, it has fragmented memories, it has disassociation, has all these different things that your body does. And something else that is often very common as well is that it will have fragmented memory, but it will become non-chronological in the memory system. So the memories that they have are so ingrained in that person's DNA that they won't even be able to get rid of them with hypnotism. But then there might be a blackout bit. They just know that they categorically happen. And that is how the brain responds to a high level of fear and a high level of trauma. Now, not everybody will have a grounded understanding of it, but to just believe that memory is memory and it's just the same as going outside and remembering how many cars you saw and what color the cars were and who was there. We're talking about something that is so overwhelming for the body that this is all involuntary. You don't have a choice about these things that happen. The only thing that you might be able to relate it to is that every single person on this planet will have a memory that you'll never forget. I will never forget when that thing happened where it was so shocking to you at the time that no matter if it's 100 years later or you're talking about something that happened a week ago, you are going to tell the same story with the exact same detail and nothing will make you forget it. But what irritates me, and this is more likely to happen in America than the UK, is that barristers know this. Barristers understand the traumatic response of the mind and they use it against the survivor in a way that you can't take this person seriously. If they can't remember everything, how can we then trust that this is the truth? Because that is a standard trauma response. And in my opinion, that needs to be explained more in court for the jury to then understand like the psychological aspect of being violated, basically. And the biggest thing I can't stress is that it's involuntary. Not to forget that there is other people out there as well who have maybe been drugged and therefore they've had the memory taken, like the date rape drug, or maybe they've been too drunk. And we've all been too drunk once in our lives and passed out. That doesn't give somebody permission to climb on top and rape us. There's so many different stories where people aren't able to recite all the detail. So in other words, everything I've just shared is very, very normal reaction of the mind to trauma, not, and I repeat, not signs of a fabricated story. So when it comes to understanding memory and how the memory responds to this type of experience, there's a link that I'm going to leave. It's a YouTube video. It's about 2 hours long. I'll leave it in the description below. But basically, it's called Neurobiology of Trauma and Sexual Assault. And it's by a guy called Dr. Jim Hopper, who has studied this type of thing for about 30 to 35 years. This guy is just an absolute plethora of information and knowledge and understanding how people respond when they've gone through an experience such as this, because your brain goes in such a heightened, frightened position that you don't ever reach it unless you're going through something as traumatic. And this guy nails it with his description in a way that I don't think I've heard anybody describe it so well. And personally, this video came along for me at the right time in my life, and it literally changed my life at that time. It helped me so much understand so many things that I was battling with in my own head. So if you're somebody out there that has been violated, you're probably going to relate deeply to what I've said today. If you're somebody that sits there in a place of naiveness and somebody that hasn't experienced this, hasn't been near the justice system, hasn't gone through anything similar, and you are still running with the narratives that sit in society that are driven by media, then I urge you to go away and do your own research, because sitting there and spouting this bullshit is actually the things that makes it harder for survivors to come forward, because it's people that carry these myths, it's people that continue with these narratives that are incorrect, that make a very unsafe society for people to stand up and go, this thing happened to me. And for the people that are willing to overcome those myths and still step up and go to the police, and I admire you and I thank you, because we need more people doing it. So that's all I've got to share today. The sun is shining and I'm going to go swim in a lake. So until next time.